appropriate and need to be rethought very carefully. We need to have a consistent, sensitive policy which takes into account people who are in many very difficult situations around the world, who are seeking sanctuary and refuge.
But in this particular case, we were seen to open our hearts and our arms to these people. Now we're pushing them away. That can't be good for Australia's image, can it?
Well, let's understand what happened. There was a dreadful event in Tiananmen Square, and there were a number of people from the People's Republic of China in Australia at that time. And we shared their tragedy, and I was as much a part of that as everybody else.
But you don't want to be part of it anymore?
No, it's a question of balance in relation to all of these situations. And this decision is about providing that ongoing protection to those who have a need for it, not those who incidentally happen to be here and are coattailing on the decisions that are important for others.
But Mr. Ruddock, these young people planned their lives on the basis that the Australian government could stick by its promises. They were foolish to believe us, weren't they?
No, the promise that was made was that they would be able to have a 4-year temporary entry permit which would be renewed as long as they wished to stay here. Now, that was a statement by the Prime Minister. All the government gave them was a 4-year temporary entry permit which comes to an end in June 1994.
All right, well, let me pick up some of those points a little later on. Dr. Theophanous, did the Australian government give these students an undertaking that they did not have to return if they did not want to?
It certainly did. The Prime Ministers, both Hawke and Keating, have reaffirmed that commitment. And the situation really is that Mr. Ruddock can utter lots of fancy words, but he can't get around that simple fact, and that commitment was made. Now, as you correctly say, our credibility as a nation is at stake in this matter, in my opinion, and also our general morality. The reality is that to force these 12 to 14,000 people back, especially while conditions in China remain as they are, would be quite unsatisfactory, but would be a breach of our commitment.
But this is special status, isn't it, that was accorded to these Chinese students by former Prime Minister Hawke?
It was a special status that was given to them in terms of saying, yes, that they would not be forced to return against their will. Now, suddenly you're saying to them, now you proved to me that you're going to be persecuted. We've had situations where some people have gone back to the People's Republic of China and have been persecuted. So, I mean, I think that it's quite wrong to say, after accepting them as a group, to then say, now you individually proved to me that you are going to be persecuted, otherwise you'll go back.
Well, Mr. Ruddock, how many Australian Prime Ministers does it take for a promise to stick?
Well, I don't think these are matters that ought to be dealt with by a vague promise by the Prime Minister in a press statement.
Well, it certainly wasn't vague. I must say that then Prime Minister made the undertaking in an interview with me, and it was not vague, and it has since been underlined by the current Prime Minister.
But, Jana, let's understand it. You do not make the laws of this country by press statement. If you want a law to stick and you want to bind your successors in government, you put in place a regulation to give effect to that decision.
But, Mr. Ruddock, we're not talking about a politician's statement. We're talking about thousands and thousands of lives, the lives of young people whose lives have been determined by that decision. Now, what do you say to them now that you're reneging?
I'm not reneging at all. I've made
Well, your committee is suggesting that Australia does renege.
No, the students who are involved have been given, to this point in time, 4-year temporary entry permits. There was nothing promised after that other than that they would not be sent back against their will. And Minister Hand made it very clear.
That's a rather large promise, isn't it?
Minister Hand made it clear that that did not mean that they could become citizens of Australia or permanent residents of Australia. All it meant was that they would have ongoing temporary residence.
Let's let Dr. Theophanous answer that.
That's all rubbish. I mean, Mr. Ruddock seems to think that the only solution to a problem is to kick people out. That's not the correct way which we should solve this crisis. This crisis should be resolved through a humanitarian and compassionate approach. Let us accept the really good people through a fair category.
Gentlemen, we must leave it there. I thank you for your time. Philip Ruddock and Andrew Theophanous. After the break, Australia's daredevil cliff jumpers.